guys! So in the last video, I started my walkthrough of the writing section of College Board's first SAT practice test. In this one, I'll be finishing it off with the last two passages. Before we start, I want to shout out Prep Scholar, the sponsor of this video. Their online program was one of the reasons I was able to score 1600. And whether you're looking for a surefire way to improve your grammar, or you just want to get your hands on some extra practice problems, they've got you covered. If you're looking to pay for any test service, this is the one I recommend to all my friends. There's an affiliate link in the description, and if you end up purchasing something from that link, I'll get a commission, which really helps the channel out. Thanks for listening, and let's get into the third passage of the writing section. When I left my office job as a website developer at a small company for a position that allowed me to work full-time from home, I thought I had it made. I gleefully traded in my suits and dress shoes for sweatpants and slippers, my frantic early morning bagged lunch packing for a leisurely midday trip to the refrigerator. The novelty of this comfortable work-from-home life, however, soon got worn off quickly. Alright, this is a little wordy. We definitely want to change that. We're trying to avoid repetition. We have quickly and soon, so this one's obviously out. Then, in these two, we also have the word promptly, which means the same as the word quickly, pretty much. So we're probably going to want to go with D. Let's just read it. The novelty of this comfortable work-from-home life, however, wore off quickly. That still makes sense, still gets our point across, and it's very succinct. Within a month, I found myself feeling isolated despite having frequent email and instant messaging contact with my colleagues. Having become frustrated trying to solve difficult problems, no colleagues were nearby to share ideas. So this one's actually kind of a trickier concept. It starts off the sentence a little weirdly, like having become frustrated. It doesn't say who is becoming frustrated, and it's talking about the narrator, so we should expect to see some reference to the narrator in the second part of the sentence after the comma. In the first three options, we kind of see just passive voice, so colleagues were important for sharing ideas. Ideas couldn't be shared with colleagues. No colleagues were nearby to share ideas. They're all pretty much the same, and they have no subject. So we need this I here for the first part of the sentence to make sense. Having become frustrated trying to solve difficult problems, I missed having colleagues nearby to consult. So they are the one that's having become frustrated. So that makes D our answer. It was during this time that I read an article into co-working spaces. So this one is just kind of knowing your preposition words. So if you read an article, it's going to be about something. That's the right word in this case. Upon and for co-working spaces also don't work here. I read an article about that yesterday. That makes the most sense out of all these words. The article, published by Forbes magazine, explained that co-working spaces are designated locations that, for a fee, individuals can use to conduct their work. The spaces are usually stocked with standard office equipment such as photocopiers, printers, and fax machine. So when I read that, nothing blatant jumped out at me, but let's see if there's a better option. So we have standard office equipment such as these two have semicolons, and this one has an additional comma there. But in this case, we don't really need any of that. If we put a semicolon here, it would be a little awkward. It's not normally used for something this low emphasis, like a list like this, and this comma is not really necessary either to make the sentence proper. So, since we don't really need to change anything, let's go with no change. In these locations, however, the spaces often include small meeting areas and larger rooms for hosting presentations. So, whenever you see a transition word question like this, we've got to make sure we've comprehended the sentence before it to figure out how they go together. So remember in this sentence they were just talking about standard office equipment, and here they're talking about more common things in offices. So it would be kind of weird to use the word however, because that's like saying, however, they didn't have a coffee machine, which was essential to my office productivity. That would be something you would like expect to go after that. This is just like listing more stuff that it had. For these reasons, the spaces often include small meeting areas. It's talking about the equipment, so if it was talking about like productivity reasons or something in the previous sentence and then said for these reasons they include these things, like so you can collaborate on stuff or whatever, that would make sense, but in this context that doesn't make sense. So now we're down to likewise or in addition to equipment, and likewise just kind of means similarly, and I think both of these would make sense, but B is a slightly better option. And I think it's a better option because this sentence is specifically mentioning productivity equipment, and then the next sentence is mentioning like spaces, not equipment. Like the meeting rooms aren't equipment, but there's still things that can help people be productive and all that stuff. So saying in addition to equipment, the spaces often include meeting areas and larger rooms for hosting presentations, that flows nicely. And likewise wouldn't work as well because it's not bringing up more equipment in this sentence. The cost of launching a new co-working business in the United States is estimated to be approximately $58,000. So should this be deleted? So looking ahead, it doesn't really talk about the cost of co-working, specifically in the next section, and where it is right now is kind of a jarring transition. I feel like we should delete it. So it definitely doesn't provide a detail that supports the main topic of the paragraph, because this paragraph is all about just like what is a co-working space, and the cost of launching one isn't really relevant to introducing it. And it doesn't set up the main topic of the paragraph that follows. We already kind of looked ahead at that. So, should it be deleted because it's just a loosely related detail, or because it repeats information? And in this paragraph, it doesn't mention the cost of co-working, so it should probably be deleted because it's just kind of a loose detail, not really relevant to the themes of this passage. What most caught my interest, though, was a quotation from someone who described co-working spaces as melting pots of creativity. The article refers to a 2012 survey in which 64% of respondents noted that co-working spaces prevented them from completing tasks in a given time. So here we have a statistics data type question. So if we look at our little bar graph here, we see that our two colors are positive and negative impact. So this is the percent of respondents who thought that co-working had a negative and positive effect on these different things. So if we look at our little phrase right now, it's in reference to this figure, completing tasks in a given time. And if we look on the graph, this is actually how many people said it increased the likelihood that they would complete tasks in a given time, something similar to that. Not that it would prevent them from completing tasks. So we definitely need to change it. 71% of respondents indicated that using a co-working space increased their creativity. That looks like more accurate of a figure, because this is 71% of people who responded said that co-working had a positive impact on their creativity. But let's look at the other ones. So respondents credited co-working spaces with giving them 74% of their ideas relating to business. So that's referring to this. And this isn't how many of their ideas were due to co-working. These bars are just a measure of if it increased or decreased, like positive or negative impact. So that one's out. And respondents revealed that their ability to focus on their work improved by 12% in a co-working space. So I think that's referring to this figure right here, and that's actually how many said it had a negative impact on their ability to focus. That's not how much it improved their focus. So we're definitely going to want to go with B. The article goes on to suggest that the most valuable resources provided by co-working spaces are actually the people whom use them. So this is kind of just a straight up grammar question. Hopefully this sounded a little strange to you as you were reading it, because whom is not the right form of who to use here. So we would just want to use who. And I actually googled a trick on how to tell the difference between who and whom, because I just kind of never use whom, and I feel like a lot of English speakers just don't really use it that much. But technically whom could be replaced with his or her, and who would be replaced with he or she. So if you can like fit those into the sentence instead of it and have the sentence still sort of work, then you know which one you need to use. So in this case, like he, we'd have to change the verb here, but we could say like he uses them. We wouldn't say his uses them. So in this case, whom is not right. And then between the people who uses them or the people who use them, people is plural, so we'll want to go with the multiple people use them, not a single person uses them. So the people who use them. Thus, even though I already had all the equipment I needed in my home office, I decided to try using a co-working space in my city. Because I was specifically interested in co-working's reported benefits related to creativity, I chose a facility that offered a bright, open work area where I wouldn't be isolated. Throughout the morning, more people appeared. Periods of quiet, during which everyone worked independently, were broken up occasionally with lively conversation. So the writer wants to add the following sentence to the paragraph. After filling out a simple registration form and taking a quick tour of the facility, I took a seat at a table and got right to work on my laptop. And we're trying to figure out the best placement. So it's not whether or not this should be introduced. This is for sure going to be introduced into the paragraph. And as I was reading, I saw those numbers, and I did sense that there was kind of a weird transition between two of the sentences, so maybe this sentence would work to fix that gap a little bit. So the best placement, if we put it right before sentence 1, the author would be going to the office before even realizing that they needed like a co-working space, so kind of the timeline of events wouldn't be quite right there. If we do it after sentence 1, the same thing kind of happens, because they haven't chose the facility yet and they're already going there. So we'll probably want to put it after sentence 2. That also works because sentence 3, it just kind of jumps into, throughout the morning more people appeared, which doesn't say how they themselves got there. And let's see, if we put it after sentence 3, it also doesn't make sense. Because if we put it right after sentence 2, we have them filling out the registration form, working on the laptop, and then more people start to appear throughout the morning. Then it explains a little bit about the conversational vibes of the place. So that kind of offers the most sequential effect. If we put it after sentence 3 kind of just doesn't make sense anymore, because we kind of need it to go before this. I liked the experience so much that I now go to the co-working space a few times a week. Over time, I've gotten to know several of my co-working colleagues, another website developer, a graphic designer, a freelance writer, and several mobile app coders. If we put no punctuation between this, it would turn into kind of a run-on sentence. We definitely need some form of punctuation here. And in this case, a semicolon is a little bit too powerful because that needs to be 2 independent clauses, remember? And this is just listing another website developer, a graphic designer, a freelance writer, blah, blah, blah. That can't stand on its own. A comma is going to be a little bit too weak in this case because it's not going to give the oomph that we want talking about this list. So in this case, this is the case where we use a colon, where we want like just kind of some emphasis. We have this list going with kind of no build into the list. We don't have a such as another website developer. It's just starting the list. And in this case, a colon would work best for that because it just emphasizes example. And you can think of it, we could put a dash here as well, and it would have kind of the same effect. So in this case, there would be no change. Even those of us who work in disparate fields are able to share advice and help each other brainstorm. Now this type of question is kind of a tone question. We have to match the whole tone of the article, make sure it's not too wordy. And for these questions, it's usually just a gut feeling thing. So we have phrases like give some wisdom. This word some is a little informal, and then followed by wisdom is like kind of contrasting levels of formality there. The phrase give some wisdom probably is not going to be correct. Proclaim our opinion sounds like it comes out of the 18th century. This article is pretty laid back. It's in first person. We don't want it to be too fancy, you know? So we probably won't go with that. And opine, do you know what that means? Because I don't know, it does not match the vibes of the paragraph at all. In this case, we kind of just want to be casual. Share advice is going to be the best way to go because we know what that means. It's not too wordy, and it doesn't seem too off from the rest of the paragraph. Like when I was reading this, I didn't cringe or anything, but if I had read, even if those of us in different fields are able to give some wisdom and help each other brainstorm, or proclaim our opinions and help each other brainstorm, that seems a little pretentious. So I think we're not going to want to change this. And our last passage in the writing section. Long viewed by many as the stereotypical useless major, philosophy is now being seen by many students and prospective employers as, in fact, a very useful and practical major, offering students a host of transferable skills with relevance to the modern workplace. In broad terms, philosophy is the study of meaning and the values underlying thought and behavior. But more pragmatically, the discipline encourages students to analyze complex material, question conventional beliefs, and express thoughts in a concise manner. So, I read the following sentence just because there's a but here, they kind of go together. So we have a transition word type question, and we know from reading the previous sentence, it's not really an example of anything in the last sentence, so that one's probably out. It's also not contrasting anything, it's kind of just explaining what philosophy is in broad terms. So these two are more contrasting transition words. In contrast, and nevertheless, like despite everything, philosophy is the study of meaning, like those two don't make sense either. We're gonna want to stick with in broad terms because that's just saying like what the definition is in broad terms. We also have but more pragmatically or more practically in the next sentence. So giving its vague definition and then how that applies to the workforce. So now this next sentence, let's talk about that. Remember, we want to limit the number of unnecessary words we have. So this one's already pretty short. These other phrases just kind of add in these unnecessary words like speaking in a more pragmatic speaking way, speaking in a more pragmatic way, speaking in a way more pragmatically. Those are all excessively wordy, and more pragmatically already gets our point across. We also don't want to change that one. Because philosophy teaching students not what to think but how to think, the age-old discipline offers consistently useful tools for academic and professional achievement. So here we have a verb tense question, I guess. So if we use teaching here, we would need the word is. Philosophy is teaching students not what to think but how to think. So teaching is definitely out, and because philosophy and teaching students, that also doesn't work, because we need the word is to go with these ing words, or something similar. And then we have because philosophy to teach students, that also doesn't work here. This is just like kind of the pure form of the verb, I guess, and we can't just throw that into the sentence. So we'll need to say because philosophy teaches students. That's the proper tense here. A 1994 survey concluded that only 18% of American colleges required at least one philosophy course. So now we need to pick the choice that most effectively sets up what we just read. Only 18% of American colleges require philosophy. That's kind of interesting, because it's supposed to be useful, and only 18% of colleges require it? That's kind of strange. Which of these kind of sets up to that? Therefore, because of the evidence, colleges have increased their offerings in philosophy. Sounds like this sentence is saying only 18% of them offer it, so it's not that one. Consequently, philosophy students have been receiving an increasing number of job offers. Maybe that's true, but that doesn't support what we have here. This is talking about requiring philosophy courses. This is a good sentence to choose after this because sentence, but then it doesn't support the next sentence at all. It's not a good transition between them. And students have resisted majoring in philosophy. Maybe that's the case, but it's really not the students' issue, right? If only 18% of colleges require it. So I would say it's probably the last one. However, despite its many utilitarian benefits, colleges have not always supported the study of philosophy. And we see that in only 18% of them requiring at least one philosophy course. Therefore, between 1992 and 1996, more than 400 independent philosophy departments were eliminated from institutions. So now we have to pick a proper transition word again. So however is not going to be right here, because it kind of follows that there would also be a lot of philosophy departments getting eliminated if only 18% of colleges require it. It's kind of what we were expecting. It's not like they're saying, oh, but these colleges do require it and base their entire curriculum on philosophy. With thus and therefore, I would say those are too strong of words to be using here, because it doesn't directly follow that the colleges only requiring one philosophy course would lead to all these philosophy departments getting eliminated. It's probably due to a whole bunch of other factors. So saying therefore they all got eliminated because of this fact is not going to be right, and thus kind of functions the same way. So we're left with moreover, which is pretty much like additionally. And that kind of makes sense here, because we have colleges didn't really require it much, and additionally, a whole bunch of philosophy departments are being eliminated from institutions. Not therefore that caused all these departments to get eliminated. More recently, colleges have recognized the practicality and increasing popularity of studying philosophy, and have markedly increased the number of philosophy programs offered. By 2008, there were 817 programs, up from 765 a decade before. In addition, the number of four-year graduates in philosophy has grown 46% in a decade. Also, studies have found that those students who major in philosophy often do better than students from other majors in both verbal reasoning and analytical writing. These results can be measured by standardized test scores. So now we're looking to combine that underlined portion. So we'll just make this into one sentence. And again, remember the wordiness rule. We want to go with the most concise answer. If we just say philosophy students do better in analytical writing as measured by standardized test scores, that works. And compared to all these other ones, all of these are technically grammatically correct, but they're all just super wordy. And these results can be, like, this works. That's a proper way to connect two sentences. But why would you do that when you can just shorten it like this? We don't need any of this stuff, so we can go with the first one. On the graduate record examination, GRE, for example, students intending to study philosophy in graduate school has scored higher than students in all but 4 other majors. So we have another verb problem here. Let's pick out our subject. That can help with these a lot. We have students as our subject. Students intending to study philosophy in graduate school, which we can shorten to just students for the sake of clarity. So students has scored. That's not right, because students is plural. So we want to say either students score higher than other students, or students have scored higher. That would work. Students scores higher or students scoring higher, both do not work in this case, and the one that we have in the sentence now also doesn't work. And they would never make you differentiate between like score and have scored, because both of those would be technically correct, and it's just like a super minute tone thing that would change. They're always going to have options that don't match with the subject. These days, many students majoring in philosophy have no intention of becoming philosophers. Instead, they plan to apply those skills to other disciplines. So here we have a little apostrophe question. It's not the student's major. We could say the student's major was philosophy, showing the relationship between the student and the major, like it's the student's major. That's how we would use an apostrophe. We can't use it in this case. We want the plural version of students here, not one student's major. So we definitely need to change that. This one might work, but it doesn't work when we plug it into the sentence, because these days many students majors in philosophy. It's not talking about the students' majors, it's talking about them majoring in philosophy. So we definitely want the plural form of students. So we have students majoring in philosophy have no intention, or students major in philosophy have no intention. We want the students majoring. The way that this one would be correct is if we added a that there. So students that major in philosophy have no intention of becoming philosophers. Otherwise, this one doesn't work in the sentence. Law and business specifically benefit from the complicated theoretical issues raised in the study of philosophy, but philosophy can be just as useful in engineering or any other field requiring complex analytic skills. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato, for example, wrote many of his works in the form of dialogues. Should the writer make the addition here? And we see, after it would be introduced, that this just goes on to talk about transferable skills. So sorry, Plato, but I don't think you belong in this passage. Like, one way that this could be introduced is if it was specifically talking about dialogues beforehand and maybe like public speaking or something, but it doesn't even talk about that. So this is just completely unrelated to philosophy and the workforce, even though it is talking about Plato. It's not talking about the employability of philosophy majors. It's not acknowledging a counterargument that they're unemployable, I guess. But it does blur the paragraph's focus. This would just go completely unexplained if we stuck it in there. It also doesn't undermine the passage's claim about employability. Like, this just doesn't talk about employability at all. So it's not D, because it's just like a random fact that they threw in there. Okay, that these skills are transferable across professions, which makes them especially beneficial to 21st century students. So this sentence started off kind of wonky. So it's saying that these skills are transferable means that that's especially useful to 21st century students. It started off this sentence in like an interesting way, and the page break does make this a little bit harder, but we don't want the which there because that gets in the way of that relationship. We just want to say that these skills are transferable across professions makes them especially beneficial to 21st century students. So we don't even need any of these words. If we stuck an and or a that in there, we'd have the same problem that's happening with the which. It just doesn't flow and isn't grammatically correct. To use like a which or an and or a that, we kind of need the first part of the sentence to be able to hold its own. But this is a fragment, so it can't really do that. So we just need to complete this fragment without adding any of the which or and or that. Because today's students can expect to hold multiple jobs, some of which may not even exist yet, during our lifetime, studying philosophy allows them to be flexible and adaptable. So for this one, we just need to figure out if we're keeping the R or changing it to something else. And we can make this easier for ourselves by just completely Xing out this portion in the dashes, because the sentence should make sense even without this part. So, because today's students can expect to hold multiple jobs during our lifetime, then etc. During one's lifetime is a little bit impersonal given the tone of this passage. During his or her lifetime is going to be kind of excessively wordy because we could just say there for that, right? Plus, his or her doesn't really encompass everyone, so this is just kind of doubly wrong. And in this case, there would actually be our best option because it's talking about the students having to hold multiple jobs during the students' lifetimes, not the narrator's lifetime or the reader's lifetime. Alright, and we don't even have to read the rest because we are done with the writing section now. Next I'm going to be doing the math no calculator section, and until then be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment down below, and thanks for watching. Bye!